Hey guys, thanks for coming tonight meetup. I hope you guys already can feel like the blockchain meetup coming continuously, like especially these few weeks. Every week I'll be attending like a 5 to 6 meetup. And I think in our meetup, I hope you guys can find something special. And basically, for tonight's meetup, we have 2 sessions. So first session, Ariel will give the introduction of total economics, and he will also give out like 5 to 6 technical samples of how the traditional business can integrate with blockchain technology. And the second part, we will divide into several small groups. So I hope like each small group, people can have some brainstorm and think about some like practical blockchain application ideas. So I'm not sure if like we have time today to actually implementation, build the actual app, but I would like to have like all the things once we finish it, like after 60 minutes, like people can give out, like each team have one representative to come out to give the speech of what you have, what you guys have in this part, and what's your project, and what kind of program you have been solved. Yeah, so this is a very general structure for tonight. And before that, yeah.
Okay. If you want to eat, what time?
Around 7.
If you want to eat at around 7, put $10 into this bowl as it's passed around, and we get really good dumplings opposite. So you don't have to, but if you want to eat, we get dumplings over there and bring them back at around 7. So by about 6:30, you need to have money in the bowl. Okay, so I'll start off.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you for everyone for turning up, and hopefully they're my chairs. No, they're not. Emily, there you are. Get one. Okay, so I'm Terry Hulsberg. I am a partner at a venture capital firm in Shenzhen called InnoHub Capital. And we make investments in Australia and in China. And we, in particular, we run, like many people in China, we run a blockchain accelerator in Shenzhen. And we make investments in early stages of blockchain-related companies. If you're interested in the presentation tonight, there is a QR code that will lead you to the web version of this presentation. So I'll leave that there for a second if you're interested. Then, obviously, the disclaimer is that this is not investment advice, etc., etc. So what we were going to discuss tonight is basically the economics of aspects of the blockchain. And I'm not talking about whether the price will go up or down or anything like that. I'm more interested in the fundamental economics of the blockchain. So we'll go through these topics, and feel free to interrupt me at any stage. Given the people here, I mean, I'm sure everyone here has a cold wallet, so I'm not going to talk about what the blockchain is. But there are some interesting things on the asset front, which are interesting aspects of the blockchain from where we've come from. This all comes from a presentation that was given earlier this week in the USA by Thomas Stratt. And basically the argument is that, Nick, do you mind?
Hard to hear.
Do you mind? Thank you. earlier this week, there was a president, Mark Suster, who's one of the most famous VCs in the USA, held a conference, and he had this company, Construct, talk about the history of blockchain as an asset. And one of the presentations basically argued that blockchain is about the evolution of fractional states, and it's a pretty sound argument. And the reference is up there. And then the same presentation, of course, is something I'm sure you've all seen before, which is to divide up the various types of coins in the blockchain universe into whether they're stores of value, currency, utilities, or securities. And we'll come back to that discussion. But generally speaking, in terms of crypto economics, probably the best piece that I've ever read is this one, and I suggest that you're interested that you go off and have a look at that one. So, first thing I'm going to address is where is the blockchain useful in society? And I'm sure that most of you have seen these use cases before, but I'm someone who sits here at A HeyYou reading around 20-25 white papers a day, and that's the place this industry is. And in that context, what I see is that really the most common core argument as to why blockchain is useful is generally around the immutability of transactions. Other things are less important, but I think the one that really is motivates a lot of people, but is not true, is privacy. And in other words, on most blockchains, they are anonymous, but they're not private. And but these other aspects are all important aspects of why the blockchain may be useful. And when we look at use cases, it's one or more of those things. So you've probably seen these sorts of lists before as to where the blockchain may make sense. And there are good examples in each of these areas of society as to where it may make sense. But the key thing about all this is there's a differentiation between blockchain as a technology and tokenization, which is where everyone thinks they're going to make money. And a very good example of this is in Sydney. There's a guy here in Sydney called Tal who runs a company called ScalaNet, and what he is doing is he is implementing the blockchain in the medical field without tokenizing it. And what he's trying to do there is get in the middle between doctors and pharmacists. And so the idea is that a doctor can, all doctors have electronic medical record systems these days. So the idea is that these EMRs will output a script stuff which normally goes on paper to an event on the blockchain, and that event will then turn up on a smartphone app, and then on that app, the patient can then deliver that to a pharmacist and decide which pharmacist and how that will be fulfilled. Now you might say, why is that of any, that can be done centrally. Why is it useful to use the blockchain? And the answer is the whole issue of privacy. And when I've been talking a number of times with Cal about this, and the key thing is that what they've discovered in trials with this app in both Australia and in Texas has been that the average person has 4 doctors. In other words, the myth in Australia is we all only have one doctor. But what he discovered when they actually trialed this stuff was that the average person will often have a doctor for the things they want people to know about, and the doctor they don't want people to know about. So, for instance, if you've got erectile dysfunction, you may have a second doctor who you don't want people to know that you have. And that doctor, you don't want there to be some central medical record that has you being recorded as having a number of doctors and then having your prescriptions attributed to you. So the useful thing in this application of the blockchain is that there is an anonymous record of each transaction, and it's also private. It's gone further than where Ethereum is today. That use some special hashing algorithms to come up with a way of making all transactions private. And the idea then is that that people will value that. Now, why have they not tokenized that? The answer is that, well, one, they've been able to finance the company so far without tokenizing it. But secondly, the incentives for average people like you and me to use this solution are so strong in normal behavioral economics. You don't need to be paid to do it, or have a token that would reward you to do it. And so they're going ahead without tokenizing anything. And my guess is that there's a number of use cases out there where people will never tokenize it, but they'll use the blockchain, and it will be a public, permissionless blockchain. I'm not talking here about permissioned private blockchains. But in some cases, though, the question is, what would some of these things look like past centralized solutions such as Facebook? What would they look like if they had been doing an ICO today or had been put on a decentralized network? And so, you know, people start to speculate like that. And I know of at least 5 groups who are trying to take on the Facebook monopoly. And generally speaking, most of it is based around the idea that the middle person is getting too much money. But let's use the example of the education industry. Rather than some big buck thing, let's use education as why would blockchain perhaps be useful in the education industry. And it comes down to these 5 use cases. And there are a whole bunch of startups in the education industry around the world who are trying to use these use cases, such as the sovereign individual, namely the right to use, control your learning record. The second thing is from the institutional side, credentials management. Thirdly, capturing of externalities, such as rewarding good learning behaviour, and rewarding of expertise in teachers, and coming at consensuses as to why teachers may or may not be good. Anyway, these are generally the use cases in the education sector. So as of 1 month ago, when I was doing an analysis of the startups in the education industry globally, there were 25 who had used one of those use cases in the education sector. And most of the underlying business models, though, revolved around cutting out the middleman. And this, if you look at most industries, most of the use cases are about cutting out middle people, whether it's in education or in retailing or in anything. It's about getting rid of the middle person margin and distributing that either to, in this case in education, to rewarding student learning or to rewarding teaching. And to also create new consensus algorithms regarding quality. So, for instance, the traditional consensus algorithm regarding quality of, say, a hotel room on the various hotel review sites, those algorithms are not very good. And whereas the newer algorithms coming out of the blockchain can create consensus based upon real data. So then I then made a number of predictions in the education sector which probably aren't relevant here. So, but then what is the underlying user behaviour related to the blockchain? Well, the key thing is that the blockchain is about economies, not about companies. Sure, companies may make a buck, but it's about creation of economies. And if we're creating economies, then economies have various types of people. In K-12 education, they have those people. In prescription fulfillment, in the Scarlet example, they have those people. Or in gold market securitization, they have those people. And therefore, the issue of design of a token economy comes down to figuring out the intrinsic and extrinsic motivations of all of those players. And so if you look at various white papers, as I unfortunately do most of the day, you then come up invariably with diagrams that look something like this. So to use a social example, this one is out of Canberra. It is a company called Quest Again that's running a thing called Park on Live. What they are doing is the following. The Commonwealth Government will pay up to $50,000 if you discover a new biohazard that is going to harm crops in Australia. For instance, recently $10,000 was paid to an Aboriginal kid who found a real threat to about $200 billion worth of crops. And that is the sort of input of oil into the system. Then there are kids. At the moment, there are around 20,000 kids roaming around Australia finding biohazards using an app. Then that gets verified on the blockchain by experts. About 85% of all of the sightings of animals and plants are verified by AI, and then the last 15% are figured out by experts. And so then the problem becomes, how do you build the number of kids who want to do this and the number of experts who want to do this? And the answer is to create smart contracts so that when a kid finds a better photo of something in Western Australia, which turns out later to be verified by a panel of 5 experts globally as a biohazard, then that kid gets a set of tokens which can be traded back into fiat money. Similarly, the expert who can verify, or the set of experts who can verify that, they also get rewarded out of the system. So there's a set of smart contracts in place that guarantees if a kid finds something and it is verified, then there is a reward. And that system is being put in place at the moment. The two things that have been proven in that system up to now have been the algorithm regarding the kids finding stuff. It works. The experts algorithm, the consensus algorithm there works. What is still being put in place is the how much money they get. Because the problem is that governments now, of course, realise that people will go and find stuff. But also, you have potential for fraud. You'll find people will start manufacturing biohazards at the other end of the system. And so you have to come up with all sorts of ways of preventing fraud. Another example, as you probably know, there are now 6 gold coins around, which to greater or lesser extent backed by real gold. In most cases, they're backed by gold in a vault in Singapore. Now, this particular one is backed by gold in factories, and gold at wholesalers, and gold in stores. And so this is an asset-backed, decentralized gold coin. But the idea, though, is still that the token is backed by the gold, and that has use value. So that, for instance, someone in China who has real gold can push out a gold token, and that gold token can be realized in Nigeria by that person going and picking it up from the local representative of that. So these diagrams are pretty much the same in nearly every case that you look at them. So, but what are the user economics? So you might ask in a lot of these cases, but this sounds like my Qantas frequent flyer points, or my Woolies, whatever it is, frequent rewards. And the difference on the blockchain of what you can do essentially comes down to that that on the blockchain, a token scheme can clearly get the tokens owned by the owner. So the kid who finds the biohazard, the smart contract automatically gives them something that is valuable. And you don't have to negotiate with anyone. And it's transferable, and it potentially might appreciate if supply is constrained. And it might also internalize externalities. So to give you a proper example, there is a nice show being done out of Melbourne at the moment by a bunch called Liven, and I'm not vouching for them or speaking for them. But essentially the difference between them and my frequent flyer points is the following. I do not own my frequent flyer points. Qantas owns my frequent flyer points. Whereas in the Liven case, when you are loyal to an enterprise, you own the tokens that you get. Similarly, at the moment, I can only transfer my Qantas frequent flyer points to my family. Whereas these tokens, the Liven tokens, if I buy lots of coffee, can be transferred to other people. And I can also enter and convert them into fiat. I can't convert the Qantas frequent flyer points into fiat. Next point is that the entry and exit ramps in Qantas frequent flyer points are controlled by Qantas, by a central authority. Now, what does that mean? Several years ago, I flew a lot to America, and I had 2 million frequent flyer miles with Ansett, due to my flying with United Airlines. Ansett goes bust, I lost 2 million frequent flyer points. Absolutely worthless. Whereas if it's in a market, in the end, the value depends upon the decentralized network value. And lastly, there may be some increase in value over time, depending upon the monetary policies we'll come to. Okay, so let's briefly talk about crypto macroeconomics. I'm sure many of you, when you're on the web, you'll see all these people arguing with each other, all these traders in particular on Twitter. So there's all these sorts of people who talk about Bitcoin as a version of digital gold, and because of its inherent limitation of 21 million tokens. And therefore, there's some people who say that's inherently deflationary, and therefore it's going up in value. And that is, in reality, as an economist, everyone would recognise that as being the Austrian school of economics, von Mises and others. And these people call themselves Bitcoin maximalists. And so the big split in Bitcoin, as many of you would know, was between those people who wanted to see it as a store of value, like gold, versus those who, the Bitcoin Cash people, who were more in the second camp. So the second camp, of course, is monetarist, in that somebody can, the supply can increase beyond a fixed level, but it's decided basically by a few people. So there's been a big argument in the last few weeks as to whether Vitalik is controlling the supply and releasing it when he wants to release it to look after his mates. Now, whether that's true or not, who knows? But that's essentially monetarist, in that there's a central authority who can release stuff when they want, and therefore determine the value. And then there's the third sort of camp, which are all the sort of semi-socialist people who are more on about having this or that to growth in GDP. These arguments are all examining something in those two references there. Now, my own view is that they've all got value. All those views have value, and therefore, my own perspective is that as long as Bitcoin can keep, sort of performing, this view has value. as does that one, as does that one. And it reflects the different types of coins, which were set out in the previous slide. So that means that in any coin that you look at, I'm sure you all do these calculations, you've got to figure out whether the coin's inherent structure is inflationary or deflationary. And just do the numbers, and we'll come to the sort of standardization with that. So if it's inflationary, then the value of your coin may go down. If it's deflationary, it may go up. Okay, so how do we value token networks? And the equation here is a simple economic equation, which all first-year economists at university would look at. MV equals PQ. And when you're looking at any coin, you have to look at this equation. And by the way, if you want a very detailed discussion of this, Dick Ford ran a very good session by Mark Blue a few weeks ago, and his slides are there in great detail. And essentially, though, with the value of a network, any coin can be valued by looking at the money in circulation by the velocity of the circulation is equal to the prices in the market and the quantity of stuff sold in that market. So MV equals PQ in any coin market is the identity you need to look at. Now, there's a lot written in literature and people talking a lot where people say that velocity is the problem. Namely, that if you can reduce velocity by having people stake their coins or do other things, then you can force the price up of the coin. So there's a lot of people talk about controlling the velocity of circulation as if this is an important thing. My own view is that that is important, but it's only after you've actually created some value. In other words, if PQ equals nothing, then reducing velocity of circulation will not push up the price of the coin. So the question really is how to create value. And that comes back to more traditional concepts of value creation in venture capital and elsewhere. Bottom line is that as of today, most of the people who have created coins have created none of that. Have created no value. Therefore, frankly, in my view, it's irrelevant what the velocity is. Totally irrelevant. It may become relevant in future years if some value has been created. Now, but nevertheless, there's some interesting empirical literature emerging as to how value is created in the coin world. This study came out in March of this year, March the 16th, as it says there. It's from a whole, you can see that these are very serious people. This is not low-level sort of economists. These are serious economists. And they came out with this study that basically showed this, which is if you take the log of the capital value of Bitcoin over time against the log of the number of active users, you get the most amazing equation. But this equation has an R squared of 0.95. So anyone who's a statistician would realise this is pretty serious stuff. And so the log version of that equation, essentially this was about testing Metcalfe's law. If you know historically, in the era of Web 2.0, Metcalfe's law was not about the fact that the value of a network expanded as according to the square of the number of active users. Now, what this empirical study, I thought, pretty conclusively showed was that it wasn't squared. With Bitcoin, it was theta was 1.61. So that dashed line is squared. The R squared, the correlation coefficient, if you assume 2, is not that good. But if it's 1.69, which is the best fit, it looks pretty good. And so, even though there are all sorts of up and down blips here, that this curve fits reality pretty well for a number of years. Whether it will in the future, who knows? But based upon that, the authors of this paper then went into some detail to look at can you predict when the market has moved away from the fundamentals? And I think that's a reasonable sort of paper. But what the broader point about this is that this is the first study that starts to provide some fundamental verification of the idea that the value of the token economy is related to the number of active users to some power law. And it will change according to the particular economy, but there does seem, at least in the Bitcoin case, in the past, to have been some relationship. Okay, so next aspect I'd like to talk about briefly is securing and scaling the network. As we all know, the miners in the Bitcoin network make a lot of money, so $6 billion last year. And there are many new protocols in the Bitcoin or in the blockchain networks which are not proof of work, that waste a lot of energy, but there are various different opportunities. But all sorts of new protocols are coming out whereby people are trying to make money by protecting the network and also assisting the networks to work. And so there are therefore people who are coming up with various ways whereby they can invest in protecting the network by things like staking coins, operating nodes, by providing services to the network and earning coin. And there's a whole bunch of models, economic models, as to how you can do this, which vary between the various coins. So the various coins all have different models as to how you do that. But one of the ones which I really loved, which I saw earlier this week, which DK also saw, was a lovely lady out of Shanghai called Jane Zhang, who's created a coin called Skycoin, and they are producing boxes which cost about $200 to produce, and they sell for about $800 one each, and called Sky Miners. And these things are radios. These are not just eight motherboards. They also have a radio in them to create a mesh. And I don't know whether it's ever going to work, but their argument is that what's the point of a blockchain that claims it's decentralized when in reality it's going through centralized switches? So, for instance, today at this place, the internet fell over because the local switch fell over. And so what she's trying to do is create a totally decentralized hardware layer as well as a software layer that's decentralized. Anyway, in her world, you can then go back and figure out if you invest $200 in buying one of these things, and you produce 1 gigabit per second throughput, and you can also protect the network, what's that worth in terms of earning coin on their network? So there's a whole bunch of business opportunities that come out of that from defending stuff. Okay, so now let's do this last point, competitive strategy on the blockchain. So far, one of the great weaknesses of all the white papers I read is that everyone's so busy trying to make money through an ICO that they're not thinking about the next step, namely, is this a defensible business in a traditional venture capital sense, or in a traditional business person sense. And so, as venture capitalists, we try and think about this. And the best framework that I know in thinking about this stuff comes from a venture firm in the USA called NFX, and they have done a study of every startup since 1994 that was worth more than $1 billion in the tech sector. And the results are, as I say here, network effects, that's what NFX stands for, are responsible for 70% of the value created by tech companies since the internet became a thing in 1994. Even though they are only a minority of the companies, NFX ends up creating the lion's share of the value. So 70% is created by network effects. Then they look at 13 different network effects. And you've got to read the paper, I've got the reference here. But when you analyse this, the key thing becomes, as a venture capitalist, what I look at is, in blockchain or elsewhere, what are the network effects that you are creating? Because that is where the value has been created in the last since 1994, 24 years, there it is. And therefore, if someone comes to me with a blockchain project that has no network effects, I say, that may make a nice little business, and please go and do it. But please come back to me if you can describe the network effects you're going to create. And so, therefore, this is a table. I've taken out most of the entries that we have in this table. This is a table we use in our firm for assessing the main protocols and chains. And it's just various aspects of that, and I've put in a few things here. But then we look at all of the major competing infrastructure providers, and whether it's PPC through to MEM or Affinity or whatever, and the things they're doing badly and well. And so, for instance, it's clear that everyone will realise that Ethereum is locked into developers. And historically, whoever locks in the developers tends to have a good chance of winning in Web 2.0 and possibly in Web 3.0. And so there are various, another example is this, is that most of these main chains, or these big guys, realise that they need to get the dApps people like you to follow them. Therefore, they've created venture financing that created funds, whereby they try and lock in the dApps providers. So what I'm saying is that this Web 3.0 environment of dApps is emerging to be very similar to Web 2.0 because people are thinking about what are the value choke points in these token economies. So, for instance, just to list a few. As everyone probably knows, at the moment, if you've done an ICO, for you then to get yourself listed on Binance or on BitFX or on Coinbase, it costs you about $500,000 because they are an on and off choke point. But will that last? Will DEXs, will the centralized exchanges overcome that? I don't know. But that they are a choke point at the moment. Similarly, the protectors of the networks at the moment are accruing value to themselves. Nothing wrong with that. Then the next thing that's going to happen is that many of the best dApps that I see are where people are marrying the decentralized blockchain, even if it's a public permissionless blockchain with centralized databases and people who own the customer on one side of the market. So the example I gave earlier of ScalaHead and what Carl's trying to do there, he's essentially moving power to the patient, but he's also locking in all of the providers of the data from the centralized databases. And his hope is that the switching costs for those people will be so high that they'll never get rid of his solution. So this is just traditional competitive strategy behavior. And lastly, we have the network effects of the previous diagram, where you have, for instance, a good example is Liven. Liven out of Melbourne doesn't say this in their ICO documentation, but the reality is what they're trying to do is to lock in the outward bound Chinese travel trade, which is growing at 15% per annum, and offering those people their Liven coin wherever those people go in the world, and making it transferable whether they are in Thailand, Melbourne, Sydney, or London, and using the growth inherent growth in that trade to create then a network effect that means that those people don't want to go to any other provider because they've got their points they earned in Sydney for going to a restaurant, which then can be used in London. And that then creates this sort of network effects that lock out other people. And there's a very good evaluation of these various things in the case of EOS, which is one of the new $2 billion capital funded attempts at becoming a dominant main chain. Okay, so one last point is how do we go about developing this stuff? I previously talked about it in another meetup, why this is a bit different from conventional lean startups, but what I'm seeing now is that this is becoming very similar. Most of the stuff that's now getting funded in the blockchain space is stuff that might actually be a decent business. And lastly, then, the sort of stuff that we look at in looking at dApps, this sort of stuff, which is pretty conventional venture capital stuff, and what we'd like you to have a look at today. Okay, thank you very much. Happy to take your questions. Sorry, the gentleman was asked fractionalisation. Remember, way back at the start, I mentioned fractionalisation of assets, and I didn't use an asset example, but the example I did use was in education. And one of the interesting things, just to take that education example, is that there's a startup here in Sydney, I can't mention the name of it, but a guy who has worked out a blockchain implementation whereby anything you do in your life becomes an experience which can be valued. And therefore, you've essentially fractionalized education. And so all it is in the end is breaking down stuff that could not be disaggregated historically in any one field. Like historically, you got a degree, you either had a degree or you didn't have a degree. You couldn't fractionalize the learning. And what this guy's working on is how to fractionalize learning and against skill. And therefore, people being able to say, oh, I know about this or that or whatever. And applying some machine learning to it all to show that they know more than other people. And I think that's the stuff works. But another example is the gold example that I use. At the moment, I can't remember what the level is, but you cannot trade down to a very low value of gold. And again, the gold startups, the 6 gold startups in the ICO space, including one that I mentioned, BGA Gold. BGA Gold will be able to go down to 0.001 of a gram. Yeah. Yes, once the on and off ramps are improved, the problem at the moment in this game is that the on and off ramps are not very friendly to the average user. But you've got all sorts of projects like Pandora out of University of New South Wales that are trying to make the on and off ramps work better. But once that happens, then fractionalisation can lead to securitization in all sorts of fields, whether it's in art, property, whatever. And so I just think you will see all sorts of fields, new financial instruments arising where fractionalisation, which the blockchain allows, then leads to new forms of securitization. Yeah. Yeah. The example I used earlier was the Bitcoin example where the data is verified via a consensus algorithm amongst experts. So the Bitcoin consensus algorithm, Bitcoin's about, Biocoin I mean, the Biocoin consensus algorithm involves, kid goes out, takes a photo of a plant or animal. The machine learning then looks at it and says, 85% of the time it's one of these, and gives the kid a reward. But if it's one of the remaining 15% that goes off to a panel of experts, then the panel of experts are randomly chosen, 5 of them are randomly chosen from a broader group who have expertise in a particular area. So it's a pseudo-random mechanism. That group then has to agree and form a consensus that as to what that plant or animal is. And they get rewarded for agreeing with each other. And then, but they don't know each other. And then that gets reported back, and then we've already seen a number of cases. We're identifying at the moment at around the rate of 1 per week a new species in Australia. And so then the kid gets rewarded for finding the new species. Oh, sorry, no. It was interesting, I read a post with a long sequence on in Medium today and on Twitter about the elimination of fear. In other words, it sounds insensible to me, but the bottom line is, can you have a world, there's all sorts of people like the Bitcoin nationalists just want to replace fear. And they think that will be dominant and all these other tokens and they're a waste of time. The other school of thought, at the opposite end of the spectrum, is that once you get wallets that work pretty well and can do instantaneous trades between various types of tokens that is consumer friendly, that in fact both Bitcoin and fiat will go away. But although Bitcoin's still got a use case as digital gold, but I don't know the answer to that. But my guess at the moment would be the second camp, because I can just see, and so, like I was skeptical. I was sort of in the Bitcoin maximalist camp until about halfway through last year. But then I sort of switched across once I saw the sheer wave of dApps coming along, and the fact that the use cases I think will be quite useful. So my guess is that yes, I think there'll be thousands of tokens, but that they, from the user point of view, will be okay. In other words, the user may still just be looking at something that's quoted in Bitcoin or in cash or in fiat, but in reality, underneath the hood, there will be thousands of tokens automatically being traded, reflecting their particular use case. That's just my guess, but I may be wrong. Probably will be. Yeah. Yeah. That one or that? Oh, yeah. Immutability can't be changed. Oh, fungibility, okay. Take the gold example that I used. If the whole thing about gold and precious metals is that they are fungible. They're like cash. In other words, so some things are, like my credit card transactions can be uniquely traced and they're different to each other. And people can look at my credit card or my debit card transactions. Whereas Once you get a fungible asset, you are divorcing the person who's doing something at this end of the transaction from the person at the other end of the transaction. So in the case of that DTA gold example I gave, using some hashing functions, there is total privacy between the person buying and selling the gold. But the fact is the gold is the same in between, right? And so fungibility is also related to privacy. So cash at the moment is fungible in our society, but we're rapidly going to a non-fungible situation in Western world at the moment, where everything we do is tracked by someone. If I spend 2 cents, at the local public toilet, that transaction will be known on a centralized database. We've lost fungibility, which is related to privacy. This gentleman's obviously read the same stuff I've read. So the point he's making, which is true, is that if you are trading gold, there are 2 standards in the world, one of which comes out of Shanghai and the other one I think comes out of London. And therefore it's 99.97% pure and it meets standards which are guaranteed. And so, that is guaranteed. And the whole idea with digital tokens or digital currencies is that they have their quality effectively guaranteed in the same manner. And the point that he's making is that in the real world, in the current fiat economy, there is a thing called good cash and bad cash. And good cash is the cash that gets out of trouble first and leaves the bad cash. So if you look at Venezuela or any of these sort of countries that are a bit dodgy, you'll find that the people who have the good cash, they got out before the inflation happened and left the people with the bad cash. So an example would be, actually a good example, which a lot of you probably know, Anton Antropoulos, the sort of Bitcoin guru. A number of his talks in his books, he talks about what happened in India when they took away the 2 top denominated fiat notes. And he argues that what happened was that they closed the banks for a couple of days, and the people who ran the show got their money out, and then left the folks who didn't weren't able to influence the system with having to go to the bank and get those big notes and take the big notes which the rich people had converted into small notes. So the rich people went to the banks during the holiday and turned their big notes into small notes, leaving the big notes, such that when the poor people went after the banks opened, the poor people got all the big notes, but then couldn't move them. And so the rich got the good money, the poor got the bad money. That's the argument. Yeah, it's a transfer of wealth. And then Antropoulos argued that there was a 20% arbitrage on the rupee in conversion into Bitcoin, and that lasted for some time, and would also allow those who could trade in BTC and that to make a bit of money. But then his major point was that all the people who relied upon cash to run their businesses would be stuck. And sure enough, The Economist, in a landmark article 1 year later, reported that the econometric studies showed that 5 million Indians lost their jobs because of just shutting down the 2 top fiat currency notes. And this also has some, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you can just see that the reserve banks of the world, around the world, are gradually being, for good reasons in some cases, like drug dealers use them, they're getting rid of the top denominated notes. And gradually, $100 notes are becoming hard to come by, go down to 50s and eventually 20s. And so that's the concept of good and bad money. As I understand, I'm no expert in this area. So, any more questions? Right, no more questions. Those who wanted food, the food has now arrived. And so, what are we doing, Nick?
Before we start having a food, I think during a time, people can talk to each other. I would like to want everyone to have we can form a team. So basically, I just found we have around 30 people hanging around today. So we are able to have 5 teams.
That's fine.
Yeah, so
what are they going to do, Nick?
Yeah, the goal is you need to think about how your business can integrate with the blockchain.
Anyway, what we're trying to do, I think, in the longer term in this workshop is to have startups emerging from it, where people can feel free to form a team and gradually work up an idea. And that is the idea of this workshop. That people can form teams and then gradually work up ideas. So it needs to be a bit more structured, I think. But the idea is come back and then work through an idea and then present that back to the group and try and use the framework of that page to think about it. Now, we've done this once before and it worked reasonably well, and we got one team out of that that's ongoing. So it would be good to see if we could do that. So a reasonable idea? Okay. So those who got some food, it's over there. People who want to drink, there's some more beer in the fridge. What's the time now? 7. So what time did you plan to bring people back here? 7:20. 7:20 back here.